Hello, everyone. We are back. Another episode in the Design Lounge, and we are kicking off the entertaining series. Getting to the end of the year, we're going to be having parties, get togethers, family. So we want to know how to entertain in a stylish way. No better guest than my guest who does styling to entertain, but also to sell homes. Jason Saft with Sage to Sell Homes. Please introduce yourself, people that don't know who you are already.
Hey everybody, Jason Saft, Stage to Sell Home. We are based in New York City, or actually Brooklyn to be more specific. Yeah, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, I will say I'm excited to have you here. I guess before we really dive into it, first things first, I do have my shoes off. I know that's one of the things you do with your place. You have a place where you get in and take your shoes off. So I took my shoes off for this. I'm gonna
I
I'm
take
gonna
them off
implement
outside.
that. Yeah, I'm gonna implement that into.
I will say, since we are talking about entertaining, that is like a hot button topic, the shoes
Yeah.
on or shoes off. And while I am a strict no shoe person at home, um, I think if you're going to entertain, you may need to reconsider that.
Okay. So when you have guests over to entertain, you give them the option, or do you give them the footies, or how does that work?
No one has footies. I
Okay.
think that you have to sort of look at it like if you're having one or two people over, right? And you're a no shoes house and they're friends and you're having dinner, that's easy. But if you're having 30, 40, 50 people over, I think it can be a little bit awkward at times, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think some people are not always prepared for it. There's also that famous Sex in the City episode where, Carrie's Manolos go missing and you don't want to
Yeah.
have that happen. So, I think it's an interesting thing. Like, I am so strictly anti-shoe in the home. And also, I think, like, one of those things is living in New York City. The streets are disgusting. Like, I don't want
Yeah.
any of that. I don't want that in my apartment. But, in the suburbs and in other places, it's not that dirty. I don't think you have to be as strict and severe. So, I do think, though, as we're talking about holiday entertaining, if you are a strict no shoes person, you're going to have more than like 10 people over. You should reconsider that.
Yeah, no, that's funny. When you say that, I think about some of the cities. You know what reminds me what always grosses me out? I don't want to go into a tangent about this. Is whenever I'm in Las Vegas and people that, I understand you've been walking the strip all day, whatever, your feet are hurt late at night. But whenever I see people walking barefoot in Las Vegas, that grosses me out to the core. I'm like, how could you? And again, I don't wear heels, right? So it doesn't affect me the same. So I know I'm, speaking from my perspective, but I'm just like, oh my, I cannot imagine walking barefoot outside. But again, to each his own. You mentioned you're in your home. We talked about entertaining. Have you renovated your home yet? I know you just recently moved in a year or two ago. Have you finished the renovation?
Oh, I moved in 2 years ago. I did a lot of little cosmetic fixes and paint and wallpaper, but I sort of advise to a lot of people, if you have the ability to hold off on a renovation, move in, see how the space functions, see what your needs are. I in my head have sort of been, what do I, what do I want to have in here? But I also, as a small business owner, I made the decision to invest in my business
Okay.
and to put my renovation budget into my business for a little while
Yeah.
because everything I have works. Everything functions, it's clean, it's fine. And I know one day I'll get to something really beautiful and renovated, but for me personally, where I'm at in my life, I took a look at my business and what I needed to do. And so today we're in the process of 3 years ago, I signed a lease for a 4,000 square foot warehouse, which was like opening up my own legitimate office and like really legitimizing what was a hobby into a business. And today we're moving
Hmm.
into 24,000 square feet because we completely outgrew our old space, had to take on secondary spaces, storage units. It was just chaos. And so
Yeah.
I decided to take my resources and put it into that.
No, and I mean, again, and I want to get into that because obviously such a success story. But take me back to 2020, right? So, stage to sell home. You've been dabbling with it for 15 years. I know you're a realtor in your past life and was doing that along the time. What was
You
it
did your
about?
homework. I'm
I did,
impressed.
yeah, I did my homework. This is the thing. I want to, have to guess. I'm like, okay, let me really. I feel like this is the best seat in the house, right? Because I get to have these conversations with these
Yeah,
amazing individuals,
the time
entrepreneurs, designers.
frame. I'm impressed. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So, but I want to know what was it about 2020, right? Because again, you've been doing it since 2004. what was it that made you say this is the time? Because a lot of people that watch this, we have a lot of people that are designers themselves, right? In interior design, in architecture, some way within the industry, and they probably in the same position you were.
Yeah.
But what was it about 2020 that made you say, okay, now is the time for me to go all in?
Oh my God, what was it about 2020? Like,
Right.
um, it was. Let me get out the list.
Okay.
Look, I think there was a real silver lining for a lot of people in the pandemic. I can say from my own personal experience, I at the day I turned 14, I went to McDonald's in another town and got a job and started working to bring in money and help support my house. Like it was necessary. It wasn't like an
Yeah.
optional thing. I have never stopped working. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college. Um, and I've never had the opportunity to stop and think. And so in the pandemic, I was also a new parent.
Okay.
New York City in particular, it was kind of burning down, right? Like it
Yeah.
was civil unrest. It wasn't just the pandemic. Everything was sort of like the fabric was coming undone. And I was working on like 2 sales that I'd had as a real estate agent, and then I had 2 projects where the families had left, were not coming back. This was the time where there was a belief like if you came into the city, you would infect your family when you went back to wherever you are. You'd kill
Yeah.
everyone. We were washing our fruits and vegetables with like, anti whatever. And there was this one house that I would go work on by myself. My team wasn't working. My 2 helpers weren't working. And I was dealing with the 2 people in their sale who were some of the few people who were about to make money and to do really
Okay.
well. And they were draining every ounce of life out of it. They were impossible. And it was just a horrible time
Mm,
where everyone was trying to work together to just keep everyone sane and going. And I would go work on this house and an apartment, and I felt this peace. Like I felt
yeah.
good about what I was doing, and it was all the stuff I had as a hobbyist for the previous 15 years, but it was magnified, and I, for
Gotcha.
the first time, had some time to think. And I remember I had this moment. My daughter was like 3 years old. She was on Zoom in her like pre-K class, um, singing in Mandarin, and I was just like thinking like what's going to happen and where's the world. And I was like, if this is all ending or whatever, like I want to be happy. Like I want to feel fulfilled. And I
Yeah.
didn't feel that working as a real estate agent. There were things I enjoyed and I was fixing, but when I would go work on these properties, I was in another place and I just said, this is it. Like the signs are there. I know I've been dancing around this for 15 years at this point.
Right.
But I didn't have the self-esteem. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the resources. I had all these people telling me to do it,
Hmm.
but I grew up in a certain way where I was told like, this is your life and this is it. And so
Yeah.
it took that really dark time of thinking like the world is over, to realize like go pursue what you want and what fulfills you.
Totally, totally. I mean, I think a lot of people went through that at that time. I mean, obviously, everyone had some type of awakening, or they always said they had time to be still. But you took that leap again. 15 years, been we're dabbling in it. Took the leap in 2020. Now, as you mentioned today, you're moving into a new space, 6 times the size of your original space. You won
Yeah.
awards. I think you just won RESA award. I don't want to say it wrong. You just won an award. You mentioned not having the confidence then, but now looking back over these last 4 years, what would you contribute to the success? Because it's been almost meteoric, right? When you think about it, from 2020 to now, over $3 billion in sales. From the staging that you've done and your company has done. What would you attribute to that success?
I mean, I think it's a variety of things. Like number one, I have a really great, supportive, incredible team,
Okay.
that help all of this to happen. Like it's not possible without the team and the infrastructure that we've built and the training. Um, Two, I from day one, the one thing that I understood because I was doing this for so long as a hobbyist, I I understood that the only thing people really cared about, the client, was is this successful? Like, is there a
Gotcha.
metric, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I was always tracking those metrics from day one, and that is always what I would focus on. And even though I often say, like, my business is rooted in design and designing to move people forward, but this is a business, and it's based in facts, data points, and metrics, and
Mm-hmm.
show people what the returns are and the work that we've done and the things that we've taken over. And now it's 2 decades worth of work. And I think that makes people feel really comfortable. I look at I've seen a lot of other companies' pitch decks, and it's a lot of general information. It's a lot of general statistics pulled from trade organizations, whereas we're going project by project with an address and things that can be verified. And that's something for me, especially like right now, the day before the election. Like I am someone who I hear something and I want to research it. I want to look it up. I want to know that it's a fact. I want to cross-reference it. I want to
Yeah.
see the source and know, like, nope, I heard it myself. I saw it myself. This is a
Verifiable
fact.
data. Yeah.
Yeah, like it is interesting. We live in an age where people do argue with facts or speak over facts or
Hmm.
say something that is not factual, but say it with such conviction so many times
That's
that they
believable.
have, in fact,
Yeah.
created a fact. And
Yeah.
that is something that I just cannot ascribe to. I don't believe in it. So I have always made it that all of my work, someone could type in an address into any search engine and see exactly what we have. And so I think it's that, and just, we have a strong reputation. I believe in the work. You know, Interestingly enough, for other small business owners, like I live for this. This is, while
Yeah.
I didn't grow up and at the age of, 7, say I want to have a home staging business. I did over time, and I remember, like, in being very young, like 13, and coming home from summer camp and reorganizing our pantry and our garage and all the closets and like creating, how we would utilize them and the system and all of this. And so all of these things that I've been doing all through my childhood and my life, I used to say, God, if I could only figure out a way how to how to turn this into a
Turn this into a
business.
business, right? I
And
gotta
when
make this
I
lucrative.
really, like, sit back and look at stuff, I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly like what's really funny is the warehouse that we're moving into is one of these big old, factory buildings with the glass casement windows. And when I was a kid and we would drive through around Long Island or New Jersey, there would be these sort of abandoned buildings along the train tracks. And I was just, God, like, I wonder what it would be like to be inside one of those buildings, because they were so unique and they looked so different from what I grew up with. We didn't have them necessarily in our town, but we would
Okay.
see them on the outskirts. And whenever I'd get on a Metro North as I got older, and you drive through and you just see these old abandoned factories and overgrown in the casement windows, I was like, oh God, this would be such a great, like, the light, the spectacular. And we walked into Industry City and I was like, oh my God, this is like
This
that
is
that
it.
thing talked about for decades. Like, I'm inside of it now. And so none of that is lost on me.
No, a full circle moment, I'm sure. Talk about
Yeah.
those case studies, and I actually I looked at some of them, and I came across a property, East 22nd. It was on the market for 3.75 years, and then you staged it, and it sold in 57 days.
Yeah.
Remarkable, remarkable. Is that the longest or the longest time from someone not being on market to when you sold? I'm sure there's plenty of stores. Some were like 3.5 years, some were months, some were
That is
selling,
still,
didn't sell, and they had a record sale. So
it's
what's
funny
that
that
look like?
that project is probably 7 years old and there's been
Okay.
hundreds past it, but I keep it in there. And it's funny, like, a lot of people, you get rid of your old work because it doesn't look as good, but that was
Hmm.
one of my favorite, because what you can't fit into that little text block, and here's the most interesting part of this. Um, the apartment was bought by someone who had come multiple times over those almost 4 years, had been in it at
Okay.
several points, at several price points, came back and said, well, now that it's renovated, I'm going to buy it. And there wasn't a single thing renovated. But there were new light bulbs, it was a fresh coat of paint. it was completely staged and decorated. Um, there were little tweaks that we made, but there was absolutely nothing that was renovated, updated, changed, no permit. And so that was one of the things sort of early on that started to give me confidence, like hearing
Hmm.
that feedback. It's not just that it's sold, and it's funny, we have another one coming where apartment was on the market only for 6 months, didn't sell. The agent took it, a new agent took it over, came in and redid it. And so what's really fascinating, this is a really beautiful apartment in a neighborhood I get, in a type of apartment I love. And my team and I, we just, every little detail, every subtlety, we just went to town on it. And I was like, guys, just give every little nook your all. And I went through all these things that we're going to do. And the agent was a little nervous about some things and was worried that we were going to paint the kitchen cabinets. And they kind of like push, not necessarily push back on certain things, but they were so tense about it. And I was like, look, you just got to trust the process. Like we do this
Yeah.
all the time. And so the one of the people who came like 2 months before came back. This apartment that could not sell just was staged. Again, no renovation, nothing. We painted the kitchen cabinets. Is now in contract for 400,000, or the contract will be signed by the time this airs. The contract will be signed for $400,000 over its ask, which is probably an 18% increase in value. Same
Wow.
apartment, and a
Same apartment
buyer
in this market. In this market.
in this market, a buyer who came and saw it 2 months ago and did not make an offer on it,
Yeah.
it now went into a bidding war and is now $400,000 over ask.
Which is amazing and crazy. And I think back to what you were saying when you're investing in your business. I was like, the good thing you have is you get to start. You still, even though you haven't invested it in your home, you put it in your business. You have the luxury of doing all these homes all the time. So you get to
Yeah.
renovate and do these things all the time. I read you have the ability to transform a space from what it is to what it should be. So when it comes to entertaining, this is the entertaining series. What is it that you
Oh, yeah,
see
let's get
that
back
people?
to let's, let's get back to topic.
Yeah, no, and actually, I wanted to go through all that too because again, we have so many listeners that are, like I said, our businesses, right? I look at this podcast as a interior design 201, right? This is for people that are in the business. We have a lot of trade that watch this show, and so I definitely want to talk about that
Yeah.
too. But when it comes to the entertaining aspect, the people that are at home just want to know what they should do this November and December. What is it that people miss? What is the number one thing you see that people mess up on when it comes to entertaining a space? Or
Well,
styling to entertain a space.
what's interesting sort of about my work and something I've learned is so one of the things I specialize in is estate sales, and that's
Okay,
when
I read that. Right.
someone
Okay.
passes away,
Hmm.
and the heirs of the estate liquidate, sell the property, and to liquidate all the assets and divide it among them. And I grew up in a house like this where there were closets packed with wedding china, silver, grandma brought over, from the old country. And I find that we have these things that that we've saved that are precious, that are expensive, and we never use them.
Yeah.
And so I am such a proponent, like over the holidays, but then every day of, taking out these like treasures and enjoying them. Because especially, these older things, like people can tell, when you pull out something that's been handed down from generation to generation, there's also a story with it, right? There's a family member that's
Totally.
been forgotten. There's the history of a family that's not forgotten. And like, what better opportunity to create dialogue and conversation and get to really know the people that you're entertaining than utilizing these things that are often packed away in the back of a closet. And
Right.
so I think that's one of the most important things is like when we really start to think about the holidays and entertaining, and then, look, we get into all the craziness. I've got to clean the guest bathroom. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. But then it's like, God, what is the point of these get-togethers, of sitting down, of having a meal together, of sharing an experience? And so I think that's like one of those foundational things is really like look at the stuff that you have that you never want to touch because it's so precious and start to bring it out and start to use
Yeah.
that as a way to create some dialogue and a narrative at a party.
Totally. Use the fine china. Don't just have
Yeah.
it. Don't just have it put away all the time. Use it every once in a while. I watched your home tour, your one bedroom mansion, if you will, and I watched it, and I noticed one of the things that you said, and you mentioned it in the video. You have a lot of favorites, right? You have a lot of favorite pieces here, a lot of favorite pieces there. This, and third. Is that really the secret? That kind of goes along with what you just said, right? Whereas like you should have your favorites, not only just have them, but have them out, have them on display, and that is that talking point. Because not only I would imagine when someone comes over for the first time and they point something out, that always gonna give you that warm and fuzzy feeling, right? This is a piece that I love, like you said, has a story to it, and that's gonna create even more dialogue and even maybe even a closer bond.
Yeah, and I think, the other important thing is like a lot of times people will compare themselves to others, right? Like, well, they had this special thing, this isn't special. Like, if it's special to you and you enjoy it and it makes you feel good and you want it around you, that's it. That's the qualifier. Like, you don't need what someone else has.
Yeah, no, totally, totally, totally. So when you are entertaining, like you said, we talked about having a few people or 20, 30 people, besides probably Madonna, because I know you give it that like that's their favorite album. Who else is on your playlist?
I created like a couple of playlists based on some music, and then now through the magic of technology, like long format playlists all come up. And so there's one like electronic group, Kalara Dust, and it's like
Okay.
really kind of slinky, sexy background music. Is a
Yeah.
great, and then that just sort of pulls everything from it.
Gotcha, gotcha. And again, just to, if there is an item or a piece, if someone is going out shopping, it's not, and they aren't pulling out from their closet or their storage, what is something again, 2024? I don't even like to use the word trends, but what are some things that people should incorporate? That's just an easy fix, an easy way to implement it to their house and make it more festive.
Um, I'm such a big fan of vintage anything. Like I love old silver trays. All most of my holiday ornaments are vintage holiday ornaments. So I where I live in Brooklyn Heights, like it's quite green and lush. Sometimes I'll just go clip a couple branches from the park next to me. And so I like looking for those vintage pieces, things with weight and patina to them. I love, especially for Christmas, and I'm Jewish, like the old shiny bright ornaments and the pinks and teals and really fun. I think you just, again, you have to sort of identify whether it's a color palette or something and then sort of really stick with that and keep going with it. Like one thing I often do is when I have people over during the holidays, I have one dresser that currently has like books and objects, but typically for that, I'll clear everything off and I'll redo it with some vintage silver and Christmas ornaments, and I'll sort of create decor just simply out of that.
Awesome, awesome. So we opened up with, you're moving today into a space that's four times the size of when you launched. Your company is growing remarkably. What can we expect? What is next? What should we expect in 2025, 2026, and beyond from Sage to Sell Home?
So I'm slowly working on a book of all our before and
Okay.
afters, just how that, this like
A book of
transformative,
case studies.
huh?
A book of case studies.
With case studies and also just sort of like, I've overcome a lot of things in my own life, and it sort of comes out in my work a bit, and
Yeah.
sort of taking all of that. We're gonna work on a way to we get a lot of requests for to furnish people's homes. It's really interesting. One thing that I've learned is that um, for a lot of people, we are the. It's interesting when a seller often walks into their home that we just finished. That is for many people the first time they've ever seen their home designed, and
Okay.
there's like this lightning rod moment for a lot of people. We're like, oh well, this is going to sell, and I'm moving into something else. Like I'd like you to do that. And then what's interesting is also, the buyers are coming in, and they're kind of like, wow, this is great. Like I just want it just like this. And so I'm
I want to keep
slowly,
it.
yeah. And so we're working on a system. I used to just refer everything out to interior designers that I'm
Okay.
friends with because the pace is so different. I mean, that's the if you're following the Station Sell Home Instagram, we could, in theory, start at a townhouse. Let's just say 4 stories, 4 bedrooms, formal living, den, dining, kitchen, all the common spaces, um, and we can be close to finish by about 5 o'clock. Probably come in and refine a couple things in the morning,
Okay.
because we have such an organized system, and it's very detail oriented. It's not, one of the reasons the company has grown is I see what else is out there in the staging space, whether it's in New York or across the country, and my work is very different. It's very layered. It's much more driven by design, less by inexpensive furniture that's delivered in one day off of a website and is really cheap, and you don't want to touch it or sit on it. We try and create like the type of homes that I'm looking at in all the shelter magazines.
Yeah.
And create these like provocative and evocative environments that in New York City and Brooklyn it really works and translates. And so I'm trying to sort of toy around and figure it out, because what I've noticed is a lot of the times the clients don't necessarily want to go through a traditional design process, right?
Okay.
Like I refer them out
Yeah.
to a designer and they're like, look, I just want to like roll in 3 weeks and it's all done. Like I don't want to have a discussion on it. I don't, but they also don't necessarily want to do the budget that it would take a designer to do the space. And so I'm working on figuring that part out. And then over the years, I've just been working with a lot of brands. I've done campaign work with CB2 and West Elm, and sort of just growing our relationships with a lot of these brands, because it's also become a way for people um, to experience furniture and artwork in a way, especially a lot of brands that don't have stores, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of brands that we work with that don't have brick and mortar, and a lot of smaller artists, and we bring people into the spaces to see, artwork by local artists and things like that that we've commissioned for the space. And so trying to it's interesting. Typically when most people scale at this point, it's like, okay, we're going to Miami, we're going to East Hampton, I'm not really interested in any more logistics. But it's really looking at like refining what we do, and almost becoming more specialized. Like after this, I'm leaving to go to something like I can't even believe I'm going to this house. Like
Okay.
that, I'm shocked that I can even get in there, and like I've been requested. And so that is sort of my goal is, a lot of people try and simplify things. And while we're trying to create streamlined processes, I'm trying to almost like niche down and be more
Yeah.
specific. I think
Yeah.
that's the
Well,
joy of having a small business and sort of wanting to stay a small business that does big things.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, they can follow you on Instagram. Your Instagram is amazing. I know it's interesting you talk about that because what you said hit me. One of the last guests we had, Tony Policino, Tonester, he essentially started a custom paint company or interior paint company online, and now that's scaled tremendously in a couple years. I know you were saying like they told you it was impossible and you did it anyway. And obviously, you're a success story of doing the opposite, not trying to be like everyone else, following your passion. And really, as you're saying, as you move forward and scale, be more specific, niche down even more, and really lean into who you are and what you guys offer. And that's amazing. So I'm excited to see what you guys
Yeah.
do next, and we'll
I
definitely
think
follow along.
for any small business owner, as you're growing, like really writing out what you want and visualizing it and seeing it and figuring out, and it's not just like, if I say it, it'll happen. It's like you say it, you write it, but then you start to get into like, what are the steps to get here and how do I do this? And
Hmm.
that's something I've become really big on. And I think, I never imagined I'd be in this seat with my business. And that's, I think the fun for so many people is now to say like, okay, I've gotten here, what's next, and what within the next fulfills me in the way, like when I was discovering in the pandemic, like I want to do this. Like I get a lot of requests to come to these secondary areas, and like it's interesting, thinking about entertaining and free time. Like there's not a lot of free time, and
Yeah.
you have to simplify certain things on the entertaining perspective when you're working, 70 hours a week. Like for me, I want to spend more time with my child. I want to spend more time cooking Sunday night dinner. I don't want to be doing logistics out to, 4 hours away.
Yeah. No, no, totally, totally. That makes sense. Well, again, we thank you. I'm excited. I can't wait to see the book when it comes out. I'll definitely keep following along. And yeah, just the next step. I'm happy that we were able to get you. Ironically, today, as you're great,
Yeah.
as you're going into this large space, I'll be looking. I'll be interested to see what you do going forward.
Me too.
I'm sure you're
Cool.
gonna make it happen, Jason. Such a pleasure meeting
Thank
you.
you,
Thanks for
sir.
coming on. And like I
Appreciate
said,
it.
until next time, I look forward to following you on social media.
Cool. Thank you. Take
All right,
care.
bye bye.